Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. This fall we saw some interesting things out in soybean fields. In fact, I think I saw more lodging or more soybeans tipping over than I ever have in my whole life. Well, why would we see that? Part of the reason is the disease tolerance and the differences between certain varieties. We'll talk about that on today's show.
We also want to talk about a nutrient that could have something to do with standability, and this is just an incredibly important nutrient that farmers have been talking about here over the last 10 years, especially because a lot of people have been concerned that, Roundup may be inhibiting the uptake of this nutrient into the plant. That nutrient is manganese.
We've got a weed of the week that's going to be a little difficult for you to identify. You may miss it, so keep an eye on it real close. We'll show you what it is later in the show. But first, here's our Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk a little about winterizing farm equipment.
Well, one thing about farming in the northern part of the United States is you're definitely going to face a cold winter. Now, it could be a super cold winter or it could just be a normal cold winter. Either way, if you're running diesel equipment, you need to do something to be able to use that throughout the winter because, as most of you are very well aware, diesel fuel and very cold temperatures don't go well together. So what do farmers do to get their equipment so they can use it throughout the winter? One of the things that farmers will do is use a blend of diesel fuel. So they'll use number 1 diesel blended with number 2, and all of a sudden the point where that fuel is going to gel up is much lower, and that allows farmers to do work much further into the winter without having any issues with their equipment.
One of the biggest changes over the last 10 years in modern farming now is a lot of farmers have built these great big farm shops, as we call them, that are heated. It's awesome. So now the farmer can take his equipment in and get it ready for the winter, even in relatively cold conditions. Now, certainly there are farmers who will store everything in heated storage over the winter that, could present any type of issue, but that's not the norm. So what a lot of farmers will do is bring the equipment in and then they're running antifreeze through everything. Like the sprayer, for example. This is one of the things I worry about the most because we've got pumps on there, we've got some of these tips and lines and everything else. We want to run antifreeze through everything. We get that pretty well set after we've properly drained out and cleaned out that sprayer, and you know what, then you can take your sprayer and store that in cold storage after that point.
One other thing we see on a lot of farm equipment is hydraulics, and if you know anything about oil and hydraulic oil, when it gets really cold, well, so does the oil, and the oil isn't quite going to flow the way it would if it was 100 degrees outside. So many pieces of equipment, as Brian mentioned with the shop, farmers are trying to bring inside. Now, if they've got a heated shop, that's great, but just getting out of the cold temperatures where it's going to fluctuate from 20 below to 20 above and back and forth, this is going to help out quite a bit. So farmers will look at hydraulics as something I've got to take extra care to be able to use it throughout the winter.
Well, here again, though, if you know you're going to have to run equipment in the really cold temps, like for us, for example, if it's forecasted to be a blizzard, here's what we end up doing is pulling in all the snow moving equipment and having that ready to go, and we've backed it into the different shops that we might have, so then we can pull straight out and start pushing that snow. But getting stuff inside just even for a day to let it unthaw or to let it thaw out, to let it, basically get all that snow melted off, all the liquid melted off there, that really helps.
So as you think about the farm over the winter, farmers definitely have to winterize their equipment to make sure they can still utilize it throughout the winter.
Well, another thing farmers are usually thinking about during the wintertime is how they're going to control weeds next year. We'll talk about our Weed of the Week coming up later in the show.
Technology is constantly changing the way we farm. Hypro innovative spray technologies are here to keep your farm at the forefront of agricultural innovation. With spray application equipment for any scenario, Hypro is here to put you right on technology, right on target.
Take a look inside any rotary combine and you'll find single rotor technology. Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the Axial Flow Combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an axial flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
I would recommend Morton for many reasons, but one is that they have a long history of standing behind their buildings.
Our sales experience with Morton was a nice experience. You know, they told us what it was going to cost, what it was going to be, you know, how it was going to run, and it worked out really well for us.
Morton has built me one heck of a nice building, and it should stand for a very, very long time. I was very happy with the workmanship.
Check us out online at mortonbuildings.com.
For lower costs, higher production, Mandico Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Avoid costly downtime with Twister's ease of maintenance. Its unique Coulter suspension allows it to follow the contour of the field yet remain forgiving in rocks. Our hydraulically adjustable Coulter angles mean you never leave the cab, making residue management easier, more efficient. Spring or fall, the Mandico Twister is the new leader. Check with your local dealer or visit mandicoagri.com.
Looking for a solution that will grow your returns on every acre? Farmer's Edge offers the most complete package, including hardware, software, variable rate technology services, soil sampling, and unbeatable support, all for only $3.95 an acre. Grow more precisely with Farmer's Edge. To get a special offer from Farmer's Edge, visit growyourreturns.com. That's growyourreturns.com. Grow your returns for only $3.95 an acre with Farmer's Edge. Can you afford not to?
I love the fact that we get very little grain loss from the head. Other brands, other corn heads, we've seen that up to 3-4 bushel per acre in some instances where we have some dry corn. We're growing as much corn as we can. We don't want to be leaving this out in the field at harvest time. So the fellow's done a nice job of making sure we're capturing almost every kernel that we can. So yes, I would recommend the fellow head to other farmers.
One of the micronutrients that's gotten a lot of talk here in the press over the last few years has been manganese. A lot of people have been saying, you know what, Roundup is hurting the uptake of manganese in the crop. We don't believe that at all. We've run a whole bunch of tests. We have not found that to be true at all. No way, no how. But here's what we have found. Almost every farmer in the country is short on manganese. We're looking at 20 to 40 parts per million on manganese. That's what you need as a minimum on your farm. So test your soil, find out what you've got.
All right, let's dig into this manganese, because you're probably saying, manganese, come on guys, that can't make that much of a difference. So I'll give you an example. Last year I was walking with Neil Kinsey, well-respected fertility expert around the world. And we're walking by these plots on our field day site where we're taking the first steps towards higher yield. So we've got a bunch of guys, some of the best farmers in the world, trying to do everything they can to that soil to get it to a high yield level as quickly as possible. Well, we're walking by the plots and Neil said, boy, you must be short in manganese out here. And I said, what? How do you know that without taking a soil test? Do you see something on the plants, or what are you seeing? He's like, no, I can see that your emergence is a little uneven throughout the field. And one thing that manganese helps with is emergence. He said, really, by the looks of things, I'd say you're probably single digits in manganese.
Well, yeah, but when he said the emergence thing, that was late in the season. So how did he know that it was an emergence problem?
Well, you can see certainly about where the ear height is, and you can see, wow, this plant is bigger than that plant right in the row. So you can go right down the row and see an unevenness in height, unevenness in ear height, unevenness in stalk diameter, and it just kind of gave them a clue that we were short in manganese, which we were. And many of the guys in the plots were applying large amounts of manganese to try to bring those levels up, but sometimes, depending on what form of micronutrient you put out, it may take a little longer to get those things available. Okay, a couple other things. One, manganese is really important in standability. So if you're having issues with lodging, yes, I definitely look at potassium, but maybe you got the potassium in line. It could be a micronutrient like manganese that could be responsible for a lack of standability. And the other thing with manganese is disease tolerance. This year was a pretty good white mold year in much of the northern US. So we had a lot of guys with soybeans that had trouble with white mold. And all of a sudden, you know, there were some fields here and there that didn't have much white mold, and everything around them did, even the same varieties. And guys started digging into this a little bit. Man, why doesn't this farm have white mold pressure? We looked at planting date, variety selection, all those things, and it came down to manganese levels in the soil. Where we had high levels of manganese, we had much less incidence of sclerotinia white mold.
Okay, in terms of how you put this manganese on, there are a lot of different forms, liquid, dry. We're using a lot of manganese sulfate on our farm. That's the dry, but unfortunately it might take 2 or 3 years before that really fully comes available. So what we would recommend, if you're way low on manganese, sure, you can go with the cheap form manganese sulfate to do a bunch of the work, but I'd also consider using a manganese chelate around planting time and maybe do some foliar feeding as well.
Well, manganese is certainly important, and we're not saying, hey, everybody needs to apply manganese. What we are saying is you do need to test for it, because it's one of those things that on most soil tests that we're looking at, guys don't even look for manganese. If they're looking at any micronutrients, it might be zinc. But they're not looking at the manganese, and it doesn't really cost much more to run a soil sample that has these micronutrient levels. Make sure that you're checking, and then look in season as well, because sometimes things get out of balance in your soil and they may restrict the uptake of a certain micronutrient. So do some plant tissue analysis, at least in a couple spots on your farm throughout the season, to see what you're getting into your plant.
Yeah, we have had it before where we've been short on potassium. We applied a whole bunch of potassium, and now it made the manganese more available. So there are a lot of different interactions in your soil. So it's important to soil test, and again, 20 to 40 parts per million on the Midwest Labs test. That's what we're looking for. And then in addition to that, run some plant tissue analysis later in the year.
Well, on your farm this year, definitely watch the manganese levels, because it could make a big impact on how your crop does. One other thing that will make a big impact on your crop and your profitability is weed control. Can you identify this week's Weed of the Week?
I choose Stein because of the family background and the genetic selection that they have. Things have to change in order to improve operations. You just can't keep maintaining doing what you're doing. And you know, the farmers, what they built their business on and what they're going to have to continue building their business on. And the only way for them to build their business is for the small farmer to build his business. I think that this is the path to 300 bushel corn, and I think it's the way of the future to feed the world.
There are trillions of hardworking microbes right beneath your feet. Today, Monsanto BioAg is harnessing the power of microbes, creating microscopic farmhands that help plants access nutrients, enhance root and shoot growth, and handle stressful conditions throughout the season, protecting and maximizing your yield potential. We're turning 500 trillion microbes into 500 trillion new farmhands, ready for work. Nature, it's powerful technology.
Are you storing grain in your bin from last harvest? You will want to avoid running your bin fans when the air is warm and wet to avoid sprouting and spoilage. The AgriDry Bullseye Controller has the capability to automatically run your fans when the weather conditions are safe for quality grain control. Stop monitoring the weather or babysitting your bins and let the Bullseye Controller keep your grain safe. Visit agridryllc.com to find your local dealer today.
We raise corn, beans, and then about 7,500 head of hogs a year. About 800 acres of beans this year. All 800 are Liberty Link this year. Our biggest weed pressure is definitely the water hemp. That's why we switched to Liberty Link. We were Roundup ready, and we had some resistance. I got sprayed 3 times one year that didn't even come close to killing them. So the next year we switched to Liberty Link, thinking we'd switch back and forth every year, and Liberty Link performed so well we never switched back. We have a test plot that had Roundup and Liberty Link right next to each other, and the Liberty Link out-yielded it the past 5 years. It's very important to have good weed control. For one, it just looks better to look at a nice clean field, but yield-wise it's also very important.
The Liberty Link system, a simply better solution, now backed by the Liberty Weed Control Guarantee, because Liberty is simply better weed control by Bayer.
Our next topic is picking soybean varieties for disease tolerance. But Darren, this is one of the things I talk about all the time. Hey, if you fix drainage, you use a good seed treatment, and you have great fertility in your soil, why do we need that great disease tolerance?
Well, I'll tell you this, Brian. There are a lot of games being played out in the seed industry today. There are companies that are trying to get your business. They want to get on your farm. And if you have a disease issue, they'll say, oh, you picked the wrong variety. You shouldn't buy from them. You should buy from us. We've got a lot better tolerance. This is the solution, when in reality, it might be a foliar fungicide program, or it may be drainage or something else that will really solve that
the big
issue.
thing I always tell people is, you know what, if you really have a major disease issue, you can only pick from a handful of varieties. If you have a lot of the things fixed in your soil, you have your drainage taken care of, all of a sudden you can pick from 50 different varieties. You've got a lot better chance for high yield. But nevertheless, today we want to talk about picking the right variety for different disease issues. So Darren, let's start with iron deficiency chlorosis.
All right, if you've got high pH areas out in your farm, maybe those areas have high levels of carbonates, maybe those areas have high levels of nitrates. Whatever the case may be, you may see a yellow flash in your soybeans, you may see iron deficiency chlorosis. So the seed companies have a pretty good handle on which varieties can tolerate those types of situations and continue growing. Because let's face it, you're giving up yield in those areas. You're not going to reach 100% of your maximum yield potential out there. You're giving up yield. The question is, are the beans going to die? You don't want beans that are going to die. You want beans that are going to live. So here's a great situation where you may choose 2 varieties for your field and use a planter that can plant 2 different varieties out there. You make a map, you go out in those poor areas where you've got iron deficiency chlorosis, address them with drainage, address them with your fertility program, do all the right things, but then plant that variety that can be tolerant for that, and then use your racehorse variety on the good areas of the field.
Soybean white mold, that's a big issue around the country. Unfortunately, there are no varieties that have complete resistance to soybean white mold. So what we would suggest is look at certain varieties that may be a little bit more tolerant than others. Yes, we would suggest you look at all the other methods to stop white mold. For example, planting a little thinner population, wider rows, using Cobra, using Domark, or other fungicides foliar.
Okay, well here's the thing, Brian. With white mold, there's one of the major soybean breeding companies that dedicated a researcher that was his whole job, was just look at Sclerotinia white mold tolerance in soybean varieties, and he found 2 varieties that are pretty good. They're the best things that we've ever seen on the market. They're not completely resistant, but they have a high level of tolerance. Look for some of these varieties to expand throughout the market. Right now, there's just a couple of varieties out there at all. They're in the late group 1 maturity range and only offered by a few seed companies at this point, but there'll be more to come. The thing that breeders are looking at, though, is more upright branching. When you look at your soybean varieties in your field, are the branches upright or are the branches out and kind of laying down? And if you have lodging, that's another thing to really watch out for. If you've got a variety that tends to lay over or lean quite a bit, that's a good sign that you've got a better chance of getting white mold in your field. So find something with great standability and upright branching if you can.
All right, let's go to a little rapid fire here, Darren. Phytophthora, what do we do?
Well, there's a great new trait. It's the RPS3A gene. That's what you want. And also look for the 3A plus 1K or 1C stacks. It's the best thing we've had against Phytophthora yet.
How about sudden death syndrome?
Sudden death syndrome tolerance is really improving. We don't have complete resistance yet, but the seed companies are getting great data each year because sudden death is becoming more of a problem. So there's a lot of things you can change culturally and crop rotation wise to help you, but then do look at that sudden death syndrome rating. It's very important.
How about brown stem rot?
Well, brown stem rot is really critical, especially in the northern U.S. when you're doing continuous soybeans. That's a disease that a lot of times gets misdiagnosed as SDS. So the way you can tell in your field is split the stem open. If it's got brown in the pith, it's brown stem rot. If the pith is white, there's a good chance that it's sudden death syndrome. And of course, you can send them into a lab at your local university to get it tested for sure.
You mentioned continuous soybeans. Anything else you're thinking about other than brown stem rot in those continuous beans?
One last comment on brown stem rot. There are truly resistant varieties out there. So pick a resistant variety if you've got that. And then when we're looking at continuous soybeans, you just have to look at soybean cyst nematode tolerance, or if you're in the south, root knot nematode, because that is going to show up if you're planting beans there every year.
All right, so back 20 years ago, you probably weren't thinking a lot about diseases and overall disease tolerance in soybeans. Today, as you can see, this is a big issue.
We didn't even talk about stem canker. We didn't talk about charcoal root rot. I mean, there's all kinds of problems out there, but the good thing is we can manage them. Again, if we get the drainage right, we have less disease issue. Then we look at fertility. fertility, especially the micronutrients like we've been talking about, very important.
Use a good seed
fungicides,
treatment. Yep.
Seed treatment. Hey, seed treatment is one of the things you can't cut out on your farm this year. It just is one of those things you have to have.
Well, you might, but the problem with seed treatment is some years you get no gain, but other years you get the home run. You gain 5 or 10 bushels.
Not with the seed investment that we're putting in. If we're spending $50, $60, $70, $80 an acre on soybean seed, we can't afford to skip putting that fungicide treatment, especially on the seed.
All right, well, just talk to your seed provider. When it comes to all these different things for disease tolerance, there are a lot of good options for you today.
There are also good options to control our weed of the week. We'll share them with you coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Our weed of the week is wild proso millet.
When this is small, it kind of looks like a little corn plant, only it's really hairy. With wild proso, it's just an annual weed. It's no real big deal, but years ago we used to have lots of problems with it because it is a grass, and in grass crops it was kind of difficult to control, but fortunately today we have lots of really good options. Let's start with the simple stuff. So like in the broadleaf crop, soybeans, this is an easy one. Just use Treflan.
We start with one of the yellows, Treflan, Sonland, or Prowl. Post-emerge, you get a lot of different options like Select or Assure or just a number of different grass and volunteer corn killers, plus Roundup and Liberty are effective.
Yep, all right, on the corn side, pre-emerge, actually the old Eradicane would be the very best thing that you can use. Other than that, things like Harness, Surpass, Outlook Dual, not very good, Balance Flex, not very good. So you got to rely more on the post-emerge herbicides. Roundup is excellent. Actually, Liberty is quite good on this as well, and Accent's not too bad as long as the wild proso is real small, like 2, maybe 3 inches tall.
Here's the thing for the guys that think, well, I'm going to go conventional corn. You give up that option of having the herbicide like a Roundup, for example, that is so cheap, inexpensive and effective at controlling grass weeds like this.
Okay, when you go to wheat, generally speaking, when the wild proso comes up a little bit later in the season, this isn't a big problem in wheat, but if you want to start with something like Prepare, that's going to be okay. I'm not going to say it's lights out or anything. And then post-emerge, you know, there are a number of grass killers. Axial is okay, but it's not real great either. But if you were to hit it with Prepare down, Axial, post-emerge, you're going to definitely thin out the wild proso. It won't be much of a problem for you in your wheat.
Or of course, you could use Beyond in Clearfield wheat as well.
Absolutely. All right, well, once again, that's our Weed of the Week, Wild Proso Millet. Stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon-D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
Sometimes, getting the yield you want means you need a whole new game plan. Think about it. When the older, conventional fertilizer you've been using goes head-to-head with tough soil conditions, they can get all tied up before they ever have a chance to score. That's when it's time to regroup. Time to send in the A-Team. Agro-Liquid isn't like other fertilizers. Their nutrient-balanced products stay in the soil in the right formulations, in just the right amounts. And because of Agro-Liquid's unique chelation technology, you wind up using less and seeing more in your yields. So you could wind up having one heck of a championship season. Make a smart start with Agro-Liquid. To find the closest nutrient coach near you, visit agroliquid.com.
With new seed traits and chemistries entering the market, your crop protection equipment needs precision and adaptability. Hypro Innovative Spray Technologies has the products to give your applications greater accuracy, less drift, and more coverage. Hypro, right on technology, right on target.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
On-farm storage is important for grain, for seed, and also for fertilizer. Today's Iron Talk will focus on one specific tool in fertilizer storage: liquid tanks. If you handle any amount of liquid fertilizer at planting time, side dress time, or at any point during the growing season, you've learned two things. First, everyone else wants product about the same time that you do, and it's often tough to get exactly what you want when you want it. Second, dealers load up on product in the off-season because they buy it cheaper, yet they charge you a much higher price per gallon in season. Here are a few ideas of how you may equip your farm for less cost and less hassle. When it comes to fertilizer tanks, getting a strong, sturdy tank should go without saying. Fertilizer product often weighs more than 10 or 11 pounds per gallon. Plus, it's not cheap. You don't want any leaks or loss. Next, have separate tanks for each product so you can store them without worrying about settling out, and have the flexibility to change your blend next spring. If you've been using the same blend for a while and are very confident that's the way you want to go, more power to you. Next, have enough tanks so you can handle a full load, plus have some room to go. The reason I say this is if you're right in the middle of planting season, you don't want to get to the last drop of fertilizer before you can refill. Ideally, you'd have enough storage so you could go for 2 or 3 days while you're waiting for the next load to come. Then choose products that work well in the conditions you have to store them. For example, liquid 28% nitrogen doesn't freeze, but many starter blends can. If you don't have heated storage, you likely should wait until spring to take your starter. Also, even if your storage area isn't heated, inside storage is strongly preferred over outdoor storage. The weather conditions don't change as much or as quickly when tanks are inside. Finally, if your tanks happen to be outside, and really even if they're inside, chemical and UV resistance prevents algae growth in the tank and prevents chemical degradation of the fertilizer by tank-borne contaminants like rust. Proper liquid fertilizer handling system can save you time and money in 2017 and beyond. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
That's all the time we have for today's show, but before we go, we want to encourage you to tune into the Ag PhD radio show, where we take your live phone calls each weekday at 2 p.m. Central on SiriusXM Channel 147.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We have another Farm Basics, Iron Talk, Weed of the Week, and much more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Soil is nature's filter to keep contaminants out of our water. As rain falls on soils and seeps down through, the minerals and microbial life in the soil remove and detoxify nutrients as well as inorganic materials. To learn how farmers manage soil and groundwater, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.